The Outer Side is proudly supported by Tie Gear. Head to www.tiegear.com to explore the wide range of high-quality camping essentials, including guy ropes, screw-in tent pegs, tie-downs, and heaps more. Tie Gear. Adventure secured. Dog and Gun Coffee. Check out www.dogandguncoffee.com to grab yourself some bloody good coffee, ready for adventure. G'day and welcome to The Outer Side. I'm Tony, and in this episode I'm joined by someone who probably doesn't need any introduction at all, Shaun Whale. G'day, Shauno.
Hey, mate.
Mate, I know that this is probably not the thing you'd like to be doing right now after 2 weeks in the bush,
Mate,
with me. So
always
I do
love having a
appreciate
chat.
it.
Always love having a chat.
Before we get started though, I'm going to ask you the fast five. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You answer with the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
What's your dream car?
Dream car? Does it matter if you own it?
No.
Okay. Dream car is a HT GDS Monaro.
Sick. And soon to be completed.
Yeah, mine's very soon to be on the road. Can't wait for that day.
I reckon that's the best that you own your dream car.
Yep.
What's your favourite place in Australia?
Okay. Fraser Island. I've been to places that are arguably better and more bucket list worthy, but Fraser Island, because it's accessible, the fishing is red hot, and I could do it in a weekend from home.
Yeah.
It's my favourite place. I mean, when I get on that sand, love it.
I don't disagree with that, mate.
Yeah.
It's a special little place. Is it a Palmer or a Palmee?
It's obviously a palmy.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I didn't even think that was a question, but...
What is your favourite band or music artist?
Oh my goodness, here we go. Depends what genre. This is going to be a tough one to answer. I think of all time, I'm going to say Cold Chisel.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
And what would you eat for your last meal?
Oh. Probably my mum's curry sausages.
Really?
Makes a banging curry sausages. I've cooked it a few times on the show and absolutely minced it, but compared to hers at least, but it's red hot.
Yeah, very good. I like that. It's a funny one, right? Like that question's come about because there was a book about death row inmates and their last meals, and some of them go heaps rogue and order like lobsters and caviar, and then some of them are like, I want a piece of white bread and some ribs. And I'm like,
just simple.
I kind of like the simple ones.
Keep it simple. Home cooking. I think when you spend so much time on the road, home cooking is where it's at for me.
Yeah.
Just a nice, like real simple meal, but just good food.
I'm with you. Mate, so obviously you're very well known in the four-wheel drive industry. You're a mad keen fisho. You're a hunter. You're an outdoorsman. So where did that love of the outdoors come from?
Good question. It's always been with me. Like a lot of people ask this question and say, oh, your dad must have got you into it. Far from the truth. Not even close. I just had an obsession with fishing probably first and the outdoors. We lived on property when I was a kid. So from the ages of about 5 to about 15, I basically lived in the country. So, I'd go around trying to catch yabbies and eels in the dam. My mate's dam had perch in it, which was a bit of a novelty. We'd go catch those. And then school holidays, I'd go with my uncle and we'd catch brim, tailor, whiting, that sort of stuff, and just fell in love with fishing. And then as I got older, it was the four-wheel drive allowed me to access better fishing. So then I just married up four-wheel driving with fishing, and then that was just your complete answer to the outdoors. It opened everything up.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, eh? So it definitely wasn't like you started wheeling. It was
that
came later.
100%. It was like I've always been into cars, like every bloke, I guess. And I went into four-wheel drives because I realised really quickly I did a lot of spearfishing, diving, and the further I could get away from civilization usually meant a better fishing spot. Yeah. So it was the ticket to get away from people and catch better fish.
And in some respects, that's still part of the reason why we own four-wheel drives, right? To be able to
100%
get away from people and
100%
go further and more remote. So how did you start in media? Because it wasn't like you just went, oh, I've got a four-wheel drive, let's start a YouTube channel.
It wasn't even around.
There was a few steps in between.
Yeah,
YouTube didn't exist.
So if you ask me, like a young 18-year-old Shauno, like you see yourself doing a YouTube show that's, moderately successful in Australia, YouTube wasn't a thing. You got to understand that. So I I went to school like a lot of people. Didn't know exactly what I wanted to get into.
Yeah.
I always, since I was a kid, I was so passionate about the outdoors and fishing. I used to tell people, I'm going to get a job in the outdoor. I'm going to fish. I didn't even know four-wheel driving really. I'm going to four-wheel drive. I'm going to do stuff with cars as a living. People laughed at me because there was no such job as that.
Yeah, right.
And when I left school, there was still no such thing as a job that you could do exactly what you love. So I got into journalism. So the way I had a keen interest in news, in media.
Yeah.
It was different back then. We had things called magazines, which a lot of young people won't even associate with. Yeah. So I got into media with the idea of becoming a print journalist. Yeah. That's where my heart was, and I didn't start directly in automotive. I started in whatever writing job you can get when you're a youngster, right?
Yeah.
So I got offered a job, and I'm at the same time working in bars. I'm driving tip trucks, picking up rubbish, like doing just general jobs you do in your early 20s. I'm studying journalism on the side, and then I get this job in a of all magazines. It was a business mortgage magazine. Right? Anyone who knows me would just be like going, what? How'd you start? But you take whatever job. I actually applied for 3 writing jobs at the time. This mortgage magazine. Yeah. There was another magazine you might have heard of called Hot Fours.
Oh, mate, I grew up on Hot Fours.
And then there was Four-Wheel Drive Monthly.
Yep.
I applied for 3 magazines. And Hot Fours came back straight away and said, you do not have enough car experience for this job. And I was like, hang on, I've got a 4-cylinder Suzuki Sierra.
Come on, man.
Surely I'm qualified. Anyway, they basically said no. Four-Wheel Drive Monthly, they must have been out of phone service because they didn't get back to me. And I got offered this job as a writer in a mortgage magazine. So I did that for 6 months in, and I get this phone call out of the blue, Four-Wheel Drive Monthly, come in for a job interview. And I'm quite a loyal sort of guy. I got my first writing gig, so I'm like, look, thank you for the offer, but I'll have to decline because these guys are, they're training me to write, and they're putting a lot of effort into me. I've got to stick around, to do the right thing. Yeah. And then they persisted, and they were like, just at least come in for an interview. Came in for an interview. That was the last of it. I was like, I actually dropped in salary by $5,000 a year.
Yeah. Which is huge at that age.
I was going from like $38,000 down $5,000. Yeah. So it was a huge drop down, but I was like, you know what? I've got to follow my heart here. I love cars. I love four-wheel drives. This is the lifestyle I love. Even if I get paid less, I'd rather spend my 9 to 5 doing that than writing about people's mortgages and business.
So you'd finished your qualification when you started?
No, I was halfway through.
Did you finish it?
I did eventually. It's a long story, that one as well. But I sort of didn't need it. I didn't like uni that much. I liked working. Yeah. And I didn't like the study side of it. I liked doing practical stuff. And I basically got a writing job before I finished my degree. And the only reason I finished my degree, it was just for me. I was like, I'd never had anyone in my family finished past year 10 at school before. I was the first person to go to year 12 and then do uni. Yeah. And I was like, I'm halfway through this uni thing. I should finish it. I finish it off at nights just to tick it off. And not that it's really helped me in any way, shape or form, but I got that little tick, Yeah,
so, and as you said, it's really just to prove to yourself that, you saw it through, you got it done, right?
Got it done.
So when you started at Four-Wheel Drive Monthly, how old were you talking?
I'd be 21, 22, somewhere around 21, 22. We're going back, I reckon, about circa 2006 or 7. I can't even remember. This shows you've been in the game for a while.
We had this conversation last night when you're discussing with your wife how long you've actually been doing this and you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. A long time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
A long time.
So for, I guess, the younger members of the audience, Four-Wheel Drive Monthly turned into Four-Wheel Drive Action?
Yeah. So it evolved. The brand evolved, and there was a lot of passion in the four-wheel drive industry even way back then. It's changed a heck of a lot, don't get me wrong. Yeah. A lot of passion. It was an enthusiast magazine. People don't go and buy, a golf magazine unless they're riding a golf. Yeah. Same thing with a four-wheel drive magazine. They're enthusiasts. They will spend their last $10 they get in their back pocket on their four-wheel drive. They just live and breathe it. And so it was good. A bunch of maniacs running a four-wheel drive magazine would finish work, go wheeling at night. Like back in the, when heaps of more tracks were open, we'd go and hit Menai up, Appin, occasionally we'd go to the Wattos. That was a big drive in a Suzuki Sierra to get up to the Wattos. But you would do all these tracks.
And you got to drive it home at
and
3
then drive
in
back
the morning,
and drive back to work. Try and fix your car before you have to go back to work. Lots of stories there.
That would have been such a good environment, like for a young bloke who froths the outdoors. Like that was your dream, right?
And I wasn't as if I was super mechanical or anything. I was sort of, at this stage of my career, I was just around a lot of blokes who were, and we'd help each other fix our rigs, whatever. I'd learn a lot of stuff. Like the other dudes that worked in the magazine, you'd come up, I broke a CV this weekend, let's go to Shauno's house and help him fix it on the road, because he didn't have a garage. You'd fix it on the road. and you'd be working it out with your mates, and you're both not qualified mechanics. You just takes you 7.5 hours to fix a CV.
Can't afford to pay someone to fix it.
You got to drive that car to work on Monday.
And these aren't like dedicated wheeling rigs. These are your daily driver, your commuter, and your fun car, right? And
you got to like go back in time a little bit. Like a lot of guys, they see a four-wheel drive like these two as normal-ish four-wheel drives. They're not. Like back when I was wheeling, back in sort of like 2005, 6, 7, like a car that had 33s on it and a winch was like a cover-worthy vehicle for the magazine. Like we didn't, like maybe one person in our group owned a winch in the magazine days, and we were in the magazine, let alone typical wheeler. So we had pretty standard rigs compared to today.
And you know, it's so funny that you say that, because like I've been in this for about 10 years. I was a late starter. I was also fishing, but I was mucking around with street cars for far too long before I bought four-wheel drive. I bought my first four-wheel drive to tow a boat. So same reason, right? It was like, well, a Skyline's not a very good vehicle to tow a boat with, so we need a four-wheel drive.
Tricky on the boat ramp.
Even in the 10 years that I've been involved in this community, like the advancement in vehicles and like the level of vehicle, like you said, you know, twin lockers, 35s, big winches, reduction gears, like it's
a pretty standard thing now to have that sort of, kit. Nobody had, like, it was rare to have lockers. Like obviously your hardcore wheelers had 35s and lockers and all that sort of stuff. You started learning about this stuff, changing gear ratios and stuff was pretty wild. It was all happening back then, but I guess I was young with no money, so that was not my world. My world was like, I had a Suzuki Sierra which had 31s on it, which was huge back then, and I had gears in it eventually. Spent a lot of money in the wrong places on that car, but it was my learning curve. I learnt so much on that little car.
And a perfect car to do it, right? Like if you can wheel one of them, then getting into a big
an unlocked Suzuki Sierra, and you're doing like tracks that were relatively tough, what we considered tough back in the day.
Oh, well, Menai's still got some pretty spicy lines in there, and I don't mean you're not allowed in Appen anymore, but I know there's some pretty rogue stuff down there too.
There was. That was a lot of fun back then. So
that was part of Express Media Group back then, right? But were you always on the four-wheel drive side? Because you did a bit of modern fishing as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so that magazine group was quite large. It had different divisions, and I started off as a very junior journalist. By the age of 26, obviously, I had a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion for it. I became the editor of that magazine at about 26 years of age, very young for an editor of a magazine. I became the publisher of the lifestyle division, which is all your outdoor magazines, by the age of about 28 or 29 or something like that. And just as luck would have it, I'm a keen fisher. We didn't have any fishing magazines really in that media group. Then they acquired Modern Fishing Magazine, and so it fell under my jurisdiction. And
Did you have a little bit of a helping hand in saying, hey, maybe that'd be a good acquisition?
Not really, but I was very enthusiastic about it, and I dedicated probably more time than I needed to into that space because I just loved it so much, and that really opened me up to the fishing industry. Which I've just been a punter until then, really, and I still am today. But
so many of the people that we both know in the fishing industry, are from those days, right? Of
course, yeah.
And so, just to put this in perspective, so we're talking, it's foggy, but 2006-ish, right? When I
started, yeah.
So that's pre-Facebook.
Yep.
Instagram, forget about it. Doesn't even.
No, it's not even on the radar yet.
YouTube maybe was a thing.
I think that started in 2007-ish, around the same time. Right? But it was like, look, if you wanted to see a cat, play a piano or something, that's a cool platform for that. But it wasn't like it is today, that's for sure.
Yeah. So it was very much still a traditional media focus for lifestyle, right? Like,
Yeah.
And I know because I grew up on Hot Fours, Fast Fours, Zoom magazine.
Magazines, where is that? Yeah.
Watching Saturday Arvo fishing shows on free-to-air commercial television, right?
That was your options, right?
So for an enthusiast, that's where you got your media.
Yeah.
And there was I suppose there was trade shows and stuff that you could go to.
Yeah.
But really, where we are now, when you fast forward the best part of 20 years, like the whole media landscape has changed, right?
Big time. Big time. I guess the fundamentals of media are very similar. You know, I'm very fortunate in my career that, unlike most people that jump in front of a camera or consider themselves as part of the media who have started in the last few years, I like to think that I've done my apprenticeship in media. That's what I learned. I learned journalism as a trade. I continued through print media, and as it evolved into digital, that's, you know, I was there from the beginning. So I have a lot more experience than a lot of people going into it, which was really helpful when we started our YouTube channel to have that experience from a decade of printing magazines.
Man, and it shows, like, with no disrespect to anyone that started with social and because of age or when they decided to do it or whatever, but you couldn't just like decide to be a lifestyle media presenter back in the day, right? You had to get qualified. You had to get someone to answer your phone call or respond to your CV. It's not like now where, I mean, I just decided to become a podcaster. I have no qualifications in this field, but I went, hey, I could do that.
Yeah.
And hey, I'm doing it. But, you know, you can tell when it's people like yourself that have had that, I guess, the grounding in that traditional format.
It helps us make less mistakes in that space, you know, and we've got our own flavour, there's no doubt about it, and don't get me wrong, most people are way better at social media than I am personally, but we've been lucky enough to create such a company now. We've got some really talented people working that there's a lot of cogs that move behind in the backgrounds that makes Full Drive 24/7 what it is today. And, you know, if I was in charge of doing social media and I can't make a reel, which is silly in this day and age.
Me too, mate. That's not what you're there for.
Well, yeah, but like back in the day, you would have learned how to do that if there was such a thing. But I guess my experience comes down to the written word and media as like a genre.
Yeah. And, you know, your ability to string a sentence together from your journalism, your ability to string a sentence together has like got such a strong foundation from all of your work as a journo. So when you were doing Four-Wheel Drive Monthly, when did the DVD start? When did that? Because that's kind of the transition, right?
When I started at Four-Wheel Drive Monthly, they were just doing their like first DVDs. So literally the first week I was there, the editor of the magazine, Glenn at the time, was away in Tasmania filming a DVD. I think it also came out in VHS. I could be wrong, but there was VHSs lying around. There was like old Outback trips on VHS and cliffhanger videos on VHS, which is a tape, in case you're wondering. It's a tape.
It's like a box that a lot of you will have never seen before.
You had to rewind it if you wanted to go back in time on it. You couldn't just skip through it.
And there was a limited number of times you could watch it before the quality degraded. And,
Exactly.
We sound really old.
That's true. That's how we started. And look, and what that did, it was amazing for print media. So now you've got this magazine that has a DVD on it. You're bringing the magazine to life, and people could actually follow on journeys, and you know, and we had some great characters back in the day. Ruthie, you know, was a fair income character, and a lot of people loved. And to be able to get an insight of what happens on a trip, on a tough Tasmanian trip full of mud, you know, it was pioneering in those days. But what it did is it grew magazine sales exponentially. Yeah. So it became very popular. Now we start doing DVDs. It was just like one or two a year. Then it became every single episode of or issue of the magazine. So it was a monthly magazine. It was 12. It then evolved into Full Drive Action because the thirst for that content was so high that we ended up doing 17 issues. I'll say it again. 17 issues at 308 pages with a DVD every single episode. We were busy.
I was going to say, like, what sort of team is behind that?
Great team. And yeah, lots of passionate people. Everyone was super passionate back, well, still are today. Yeah. We have not changed our MO, I guess, the whole way through. Everyone's super passionate, and we've got now a dedicated DVD team. Yeah. Camera guys, producers, editors. We've got photographers. Photography played a huge part in what we did. Journalists. Then we had like the editors, the publishers. Then we had the salespeople bringing the money in to allow us to do what we do. So the combination was, quite a great formula.
Yeah, and I mean that's like the birth of four-wheel drive multimedia in some respects, right?
Yeah, big time.
And, I mean, I love reading, right? I've always been a reader. So for me, reading magazines, I love reading the articles, and like even like I'm into hunting, the shooting magazines. I love the little stories when they're like stalking a deer or whatever, and I still read that stuff today.
Dude, magazines. I grew up on magazines.
Yeah,
that's why I think I was so passionate to work in that. I used to get fishing magazines. Like I used to subscribe to Fishing World and Fishing Monthly, and the joy you had when that subscription came in the mail and it was wrapped in plastic, and you got it and you first grabbed that magazine and ripped that plastic off. That I'll never forget that. And we don't get that today.
No,
everything's so accessible.
It's so immediate, right? Like,
you want to watch a fishing video, go on YouTube, bang, you're watching fishing videos within 2 seconds.
Endless content, right? And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm just old, but like I feel like some of the romance is gone because, man, I'm telling you, the amount of money I spent on every month, Street Machine would turn up, Zoom would turn up, Fishing Monthly would turn up, like Fishing World, Modern Fishing, and it's like, I got 5 magazines a month coming in, and I was earning bugger all money back then as a 18, 19-year-old, but just the expectation of like, oh, what am I going to see this month? Oh
man, I think everyone in our era understands. So I guess that's what motivated me to get into print media. It's just the excitement of magazines and just how they could tell a story. You had photos and it required a bit of imagination too, because you're going through reading these stories. Like I'd flip through a magazine first up and just look at the pictures and captions and pull quotes that jumped out at me. I'd go through that and then I'd go back with that in mind of which articles I wanted to read. I'd read that and I'd read the thing from top to bottom, and it was an investment of time, and I just loved every moment of magazines. It's
and not directly related to what you do, but like the trading post, man. I remember like waiting for the trading post to come out because you needed a car part, and you're like scouring the trading post, trying to call someone on a landline.
Get in early. Got to get in early.
Yeah, the whole world has changed so much in terms of media and how we access stuff.
Yeah.
So you were doing 17 issues a year, which is insane.
One every 3 weeks, it works out roughly.
And 17 DVDs.
Yep. And it was a 308-page magazine, which was huge. And yes, it has a high portion of ads in that, but you always run about a 60-40 editorial to advertising.
And I suppose when you started with the DVDs, that would have opened up a whole world of advertising opportunities as well, right? In terms of multimedia advertising as opposed to like a static ad in a magazine.
It absolutely did. It did, and it changed the brand so much, but we were competing with, at this stage, free-to-air TV. And a lot of your big agencies and the guys that think they know better in their marketing rooms would look at free-to-air as the pinnacle of media, magazines, and a DVD, some throwaway DVD. But what they didn't realise, a lot of these companies, is the audience that we had. They're not just, ironing their clothes on a Saturday, looking at a TV show on Full Driving going, oh yeah, that's a nice caravan. These are guys that are spending $10 of their own money to buy that magazine, and you've got to really be into something before you spend $10 on content.
Yeah, 100%. And even now,
this is the whole thing about where people go so wrong these days in content, is they assume because they're putting it out there for free that people want to watch it. If you come from the mentality of traditional media, you're trying to get someone to part with $10, and that was a lot of money back then.
Got to earn it.
So you've got to earn the reader. You've got to earn the audience.
And then you've got to retain them. So you've got to keep the content fresh. It's got to be exciting. You've got to go harder, go further, right?
Yeah, big time. So it's understanding your audience and getting the right content in there. Not just going, I'm making content for the sake of content and I'm going to show people what I want to show them. It's more so, no, what do people want and how do I deliver that content in a way? And if you're an enthusiast, that comes quite natural because you're into the same stuff they're into, right?
Because you get excited by it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, that was like sort of our little recipe. But yeah, DVDs like took off in a big way. Readership jumped huge. Four-Wheel Drive Monthly became the biggest selling men's magazine in the country, beat Men's Health, Street Machine.
Really?
Yeah, Wheels, Motor, all that. It was pretty crazy when you think about it, a niche four-wheel drive. And four-wheel driving was, you could tell, was getting bigger and more popular at this stage, obviously. And yeah, man, I was a journalist, mind you, not really on the DVDs back in the day, but I just had this desire to travel so bad. And I saw the dudes like going down to Tasmania or Cape York or the Kimberley in the name of work, and I was like, how do I sign up for that?
Yeah.
So like, I didn't really want to become a presenter. I was sort of like, I want to travel, and if that's the ticket to travel, sign me up.
Can I just sit in the background and write articles? Or
Yeah, yeah, I'll do anything it takes to get on some of those trips. Like,
So at that point, you were the publisher, is that right, or that came later?
no, I was like, I sort of went through that side of media where I was like editing, publishing, and then we had our presenters, and they were doing trips, and obviously it was a weird hybrid because I started doing trips and still a publisher, and I sort of got to a stage in my career where the owner was like, mate, you've got to make a decision. You go down the business side of media, or you go down the presenting side and be a presenter, because you can't do both.
Yeah.
And so I was like, that's an easy decision. I'll be a presenter.
See you, mate.
Yeah, I'll be going to Cape York next week. How good's this? You know, and that's what I did. But I had a nice foundation in media, which was fantastic when we started Full Drive 24/7.
Yeah. So how long were you doing the DVDs with Action before you turned that bit? Well, you obviously acquired that business and then transitioned it to Full Drive 24/7. There was a few years you were doing Action DVDs, right?
Yeah. Oh, I hate the thing.
You know, I'm just asking you these questions because I know you're bad with your years.
I'm bad with years, but I'm all right with numbers, if that makes sense. So my first proper, where I was a presenter, Ruthie was the main presenter. I was this young bloke with a hat that was 2 sizes too big for him. That was driving a stock standard 60 series on video. That was issue 150. Now the magazine closed around, it was after 300.
It was 320 or 330,
something like that. I remember doing the 300th issue, which was a special one. But yeah, so essentially I was on it, not every show, but for 150 episodes roughly, I was in and out. And towards the end, I was in a lot more than I was out.
And you would have, I mean, just to be traveling that much, like
insane.
To shoot 17 DVDs worth of content, plus your still image content, plus your articles, plus.
Correct,
like,
and I was still writing articles back then, and then it got to the stage where I was basically a full-time presenter in the end, and I was writing like a column, and like little. I was writing at one stage 10,000 words, say an issue of the magazine. Then it got down to like 500.
Yeah, it's like a tweet.
Yeah, it was like a lousy email basically by the end of it.
That's so good, man. And so that was, I guess, your apprenticeship through four-wheel driving and media happened at the same time, right?
Yeah,
so
big time. Yeah.
Print media started to decline in sales.
Yeah, big time.
Because of social media, right?
Yes. There's a multitude of things, but yes, the internet, you could, if you just had a one-word answer, the internet hurt print media in a big way. But also, it didn't matter how good your content was in a magazine, your distribution was suffering. What I mean by that is, in your news agents, they could get more money for space in their little tiny news agency. They get more money from lotto tickets, pens, lollies. You got a magazine that's this big, people may or may not buy it. They were stocking less and less magazines, so naturally your distribution of magazines shrunk despite how good your content was.
Yeah, right. And so this is probably a strange question for me to ask you, but a magazine that's released 17 times a year, like, they have a time frame in which they can be sold.
Yep.
Does the publisher buy that back if it doesn't get sold from the newsagent?
Yeah, that was like a different. I'm a bit hazy on this because it was so long ago, but yes, basically they were on like a consignment. A lot of the magazines.
We'll give you a credit or whatever.
Yeah, sort of. So and say the news agent sells, they might get 10 magazines, only sell 7. They might only ask for 7 next time.
All right. So apologies for the technical difficulties there. We just had the lights turn off on us. So magazines, for a number of reasons, were starting to sort of decline in sales.
Yep.
And how did that then turn into you acquiring? Did you buy Action or did you buy?
No.
What did you buy?
No, I didn't buy anything. I lost my job and started a business.
Kind of different, but
yeah. I lost my job because there was no magazine left. The magazine had a definitive end date.
Yeah.
It is finishing up, and the previous owner of Express Media started Full Drive Supercentre and used that media brand to kickstart retail, and it was a very strategic move on his behalf to get away from a dying media print, which was a smart move. Seen the writing on the wall, and got into retail.
Four-wheel drive accessories for a growing community that he's helped build with his media.
And he already had media to get this name out there.
Yeah.
So, it was a masterstroke.
Yes.
Right.
And still a wildly successful company.
One of the best business stories you'll ever hear about.
Yeah.
He's quite a private sort of guy, so that's the only reason you don't read more about this stuff. But what he has achieved in the business space, not just to mention four-wheel drive, media and retail.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, someone will write a book about that one day. But anyway, the long and short for me though, I was out of a job. Not really.
Yeah.
I could have, I've been offered from the owner to go into the retail space.
Yeah.
But I'm a pretty basic bloke in the sense that if I'm not passionate about something, I'm not going to go real well.
Yeah.
And I know that. And for me, the media was what I loved. And I knew there was nothing wrong with the content. It was just the ability to get that content to the people.
Yeah.
So I was like, we should have a crack at this ourselves. So we licensed the name Four-Wheel Drive. I'm trying to remember the name. There's been so many name changes over my career. Four-Wheel Drive Action. We licensed that name, and there was dramas with that, and we just went, you know what, forget it. Line in the sand, four-wheel drive 24/7, and think of it as the evolution of the brand. We've gone from four-wheel drive Action, which everyone knows the magazine and DVDs, to four-wheel drive 24/7. You can get your content 24/7. That was the evolutionary process. Now we've chosen YouTube. Now keep in mind, still from a commercial point of view, everyone's still loving free-to-air TV.
Yeah.
That's the pinnacle of media. If you're on telly, you've made it.
Yeah.
And here we are. I'm moving strategically into YouTube in 2018 because I'm like, that's the future. I'm seeing Netflix. I'm seeing,
Everything, yeah.
everything suggesting from that sort of platform where people can get stuff on demand. Not waiting until 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning to see a fishing or four-wheel drive show when everyone who is an enthusiast is out there doing it anyway. So
Thank you. I'm so glad you said that, because that's
true.
always my argument. Like, a four-wheel drive show on free-to-air TV on a Saturday arvo, you should be out in the bush, not sitting on the couch.
100%.
It's the people who are like, it's like the spectacle of it, but they're not a participant, right?
Mark my words, every single person that's stuck in free-to-air and they're stuck making a show on free-to-air wishes they jumped on YouTube 5-6 years ago. I wish I jumped on YouTube 5 years before I did.
Yeah.
So I get it, but all the networks will essentially exaggerate the viewers on free-to-air TV because they're trying to sell ads. Like,
It's an estimate of viewers
from a set-top box in about 100 houses or something.
And who owns the company that provides the data? The TV networks,
And
right?
the TV networks, the better the numbers look, the more money they're going to get in from.
Of course.
So it's
like
not,
when they say, 3 million people watched Maths the other night. I'm like, how do you know that? Like, you don't. I'm sorry.
You absolutely don't.
It's a somewhat educated guess-ish.
It's a guess, and they're always going to lean on the positive side so they can get more advertising in. With YouTube, it's pretty cut and dry. No matter what you do, your numbers are your numbers.
Well, as a marketer, man, I remember vividly the phone call, because GME was advertising with Action when it was a magazine.
Yep.
And we were doing DVDs. And I remember the phone call from Glenn and him saying, we're going to start a YouTube channel, but trust me, it's going to work. And even in my mind, I was like,
it's a bold move.
Bold
Really
move.
was.
But, I backed you guys because I knew that you produced an amazing product, and I knew that if that's the decision that you'd made, that I'd support it, right? And for us as a business at GME, man, it's been amazing what you've helped our brand achieve. So it was absolutely the right decision.
It was, yeah.
The benefit of hindsight, saying you wish you started it 5 years earlier, well,
I wish we did, but who knows? Who knows?
I wish I'd bought less magazines and bought a house earlier too, but here we are.
I wish I bought after. You'd have to pay shares, but I
Some
didn't.
Bitcoin.
I didn't. But anyway, like that was just the evolution of our brand, and we've obviously, it's been calculated over 20 years, and here we are today on YouTube, and I love it. I love it. Now we're not charging people $10 a magazine; we're giving our content for free.
And how many eps are you releasing? Like, how many pieces of content are you releasing on the channel now?
We are doing at least one a week.
Yeah.
minimum every Thursday. There's something.
But it's
new.
usually more than that, right?
Yeah, we sometimes Tuesdays.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love to see it where every single day of the week we've got content coming out. That would be wild. I hope our camera crew and our producers and everyone doesn't hear about that one, but I would love to. It's just, you know, becomes like the hub of just content, cool content.
Yeah. And the appetite is clearly there, and it's reflected in the viewers. And I think that's the most important part for me as an advertiser. I don't need to wait on the data from the networks that may or may not be true. I can just look at it, and I can see how many people, and I can read the comments, and I can see if the audience is engaging with it. You know, like it's a very transparent business model, right?
Exactly right. And, you know, you can even go deep into the analytics and see what age groups are watching your stuff, male, female, locations, and you can get a really good gauge of what your audience or who your audience is. I mean, we are very unique in our content in that we have a very high percentage. We actually met with someone from YouTube and they were shocked with the size of our views and subscriber base, that our huge percentage of Australian audience. That's just not normal. Like normally big YouTube channels in Australia will have a high, it makes sense, we're such a small country in the scheme of the world population, right? So when they saw our numbers, they were like, what? You've got 65% Australian audience?
Yeah, not a big chunk of US audience that are watching it just for the spectacle,
And mind you, we're growing the US audience. Like, you know, I've filmed 8 shows in the US now, and we're growing that side of the audience, but it's pretty cool to see so many Aussies love our stuff. It's not, you know, it's not going overseas and people are just looking at.
Oh man, what you guys have built, and I mean, obviously we've travelled together quite a bit, and you know, it just blows me away. Like, you know, we're sitting in KFC having a sneaky little bit of Dirty Bird the other night in South Nowra, and you know, those kids walk in and their jaws hit the floor. That, you know, everywhere we go, people recognise you. They recognise the cars. They recognise the brands. Like. It's just such an amazing community that you've built behind this show.
It's wild. I never thought the four-wheel drive industry as a whole, like media, would be so popular. I mean, it was always a niche field, and here we are, you know, getting recognised everywhere. It's cool. It's cool that so many people are getting outside, enjoying the outdoors. I feel happy about that, because what makes it for me is, getting noticed at KFC is sick. I've got free KFC before. That's another story. Jock and I will tell you.
Jock has actually, he told me that this week.
We're pretty stoked.
In that same KFC.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. But what really makes me happy is when I go to a four-wheel drive show and a little kid comes up to me, stoked, and they're telling me about the time they went to Fraser Island last week with their parents. And they caught their first dart off the beach. Yeah. And I'm like, far out. Best. That's cool. That's why we do it.
Well, you're creating the next generation of outdoor enthusiasts, right?
And there's so many paths like kids can take, and if they become obsessed about this lifestyle, and that's cool.
Well, that's like, I remember someone saying to me, like, when I was right into my street cars back in the day, they're like, oh, you'll never be able to be a drug addict. You won't have any money for drugs. You're spending all your money on these shit boxes, you know? And
Correct.
I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, you got me. But it's so true. And, like, for me, having a daughter now, it's, like, so relevant to me. Like, the last thing I want is for her to grow up sitting there with an iPad. Like, I want her to be in this thing. She's already been out. We've already had a camping.
You've camped, 3
months old, we've got a camping, and people are going,
cool.
You guys are insane. It's like, probably, but we just want it to be normal, right? We want it to be, she's just comfortable being outside. Yeah, it's good for you.
It's a very positive way to live your life, being outdoors and experiencing the bush and learning about Australia, and, you know, not just sticking to your city. And I meet lots of people in my travels that have never been out of Harvey Bay. They've lived there their whole life, or, you know, like, get out and explore. We've got the best country in the world, and it's all accessible at the moment with these things.
We have everything.
Everything. Every single terrain.
If you want snow, if you want reef, if you want rainforest, you want the bush, you want the desert, like, we literally have everything.
And one thing I've learnt in my travels, like, I've spent a bit of time in the US over the last 2 years, and they have some wild tracks, and it was such a hoot taking my own car over there. It was, you know, up there in terms of cool things you've done in your life. That'll probably top it. But one thing I've learned is just how bloody good we've got it in Australia. Like, they have cool tracks, and there's a lot to explore, and it's all new to me, so it was exciting. But everyone was like, oh, you Aussies are crazy. Like, you've got dirt roads everywhere. I'm like, yeah, it's normal, isn't it? Not really. They have, like, bitumen roads to all your main, like, sort of off-road destinations. And then we have major highways that are dirt.
Yeah, still.
Major thoroughfares that go across this country that are dirt, and we've got probably more dirt road than anywhere else in the country. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You know, and what that means is we've got a large population that live in the cities, and we've got so much unexplored areas out there that you can go and travel to, and you don't get that around the world. So
Man, well, we've spent the last 2 weeks filming for your show,
yeah,
right?
that's why we look like this.
Yeah, that's why.
If you're wondering why, I'm not. We'll come for a couple of weeks out in the bush.
And it's also very lucky that you can't smell us at the moment because I reckon we don't smell very good.
It wouldn't be pretty.
But, you know, we did a New South Wales local trip, and I've lived in New South Wales my whole life. I've never been to any of these. I mean, I've been to Yowal, but like where we camped last night. Never been there
so
before.
have I. That's new for me. I drove a track and a camp. Like in the last 24 hours, I've done a bunch of new things, and I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah. And you were in New South Wales for a long time, and that's what's so good for me. Like, we're close to the Wattigans here. I can shoot up to the Wattigans and go drive a track that I've never driven before.
Yeah.
I can go camp somewhere different, and you know, my wife and I do a lot of camping, and we're trying to never go to the same place twice. Obviously, there's a few exceptions if they're really special, but you know, like there is so much. It is almost, I don't want to say endless, but close to endless. I don't know if you could do it all in your life.
No, you never will. And that's people say, oh, you would have seen everywhere. There is so much of Australia I haven't seen. I've scratched the surface, and I do it as a job.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and the way camping's going as well, there's more hip camps and private properties you can go camp at. It just opens a whole nother element of where you can go.
Millions of hectares of land, right?
We can stay. We stayed at a hip camp or on Wiki Camp the other day, which was someone's property. It was right on the river. We caught flathead 2.5 meters from the back of where my swag was set up.
Yeah,
right on the beach and cooked them up for breakfast. I mean,
it's so good, and it's probably maybe an interesting segue there. Like, obviously, where you started when doing the travel shows, it was public land, right? And free camps in the bush, right? But then, even in the show recently, I've noticed, like, we've stayed in a lot more hip camps, and you guys don't really do the full drive park thing. I know Jesse and Jock have done maybe 1 or 2, but really, it's still focused on public land and accessibility, right?
I think so, yeah.
Do you think that that's going to change? Do you think that there's going to be more of the private property that we're going to need to access?
Without a shadow of a doubt. Without a shadow of a doubt. The future of camping, unfortunately, you'll see a lot more private land camping in that you'll be paying to camp on someone's land because that's the only way people will be able to manage those campsites.
We saw it where we stayed last night, right? Like the most
perfect example.
Stunning spot, and when we came in, it looked like a tip.
Yeah, there's rubbish everywhere, and it would probably, if you could ignore the rubbish for 2 seconds, it'd be one of the most stunning free camps in this country.
That was unbelievable.
The view. Anyway, but yes, it's ruined by rubbish, and people wonder why places get shut down. That's probably a prime example.
So you think, private. I mean, we stay in a lot of hip camps for one reason, and that's, as we alluded to earlier, we go to camp and 4-wheel drive to get away from people. And then you go to like the busy state forests on a public holiday or school holidays, and like you're shoulder to shoulder with people. Hip camps are kind of controlled in that you know that you're going to be the only one there, or maybe there'll only be another couple of groups.
Yeah, and they're going to be clean for the most part and all the rest. And I think this is not indicative of Australia. I think close to capital cities, you're going to find the pressure is intense on these free campsites, hence why you'll be going to more of these hip camps and pay to camp places. When you go further afield, as you know, you've seen it a million times, but you go to places that are less ventured, you're going to see more pristine wilderness. That's just how that works.
Yeah, and I think as more areas get closed down, then it puts
more pressure.
Additional pressure on the remaining. And like, you know, we were up the Wattigans the other day, and like, that joint's trashed, man. And it's like, it's a real shame. And like, that's my backyard now. I
know.
And I want to be able to jump in my car and 30 minutes later have dirt under my tyres and go free camping. But the way it's going, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to be able to still do that when my daughter grows up. Like,
I'd like to think so. I'd like to think that we're going to change our ways, and I've seen it work. Like when I went to the States, they nearly lost a lot of their public land, and they keep it in a pristine. They keep it so clean. It can be done, is what I'm getting at. It can be done if people change their mentality a little bit and realise. See, goes back to Australia being a lucky country. We have so much space. We take it for granted in a way. We have the best campsites. We have you go in the Wattigans. You could probably list off the top of your head 20 campsites you could stay at tonight.
100%.
Right, easily
for free.
That's one state
I can
forest.
take my dog. I can have a fire. I can within reason, do what I want to do.
Correct.
And they're the things I want to do, right?
And that's just one little place, and around Australia there are countless. They are being closed down, but because there's so many, I guess there's no fear of like, oh, well, that one's closed down, let's go to that other one. There comes a point though where they start getting really closed down, and there's too much pressure. They might put a blanket ban on it, or we start to lose it, and then you start to notice it. But by that stage, it's too late. So America have probably gone down that path before us. They've got a population of 350 million people, and they somehow, in the same sort of space as Australia, and they somehow manage it really well. We need to get better management and realise that it's not okay to lose a single track or a campsite today, because that's going to never come back in the future.
Yeah, Simon from Tough Dog and I were talking about this last night while you were trying to kill us with meat and cheese.
Having a big old cook up.
When have you ever seen a track get closed and then reopened?
Never. You won't see it.
It just doesn't happen, right? Like the gates go in.
You won't see it.
It does not happen.
Which is a bloody shame.
It really is, yeah.
Mate. There's a million things you talk about on that topic, and none of it's really positive, but it all starts with changing our ways.
It's just mentality, right?
If we don't do anything about it, we're going to lose it, and there's no doubt about that. That's a certainty. There's a big gap between changing it's because most people do the right thing. So there's a lot of people probably watching this going, yeah, but we don't throw. And it's not even just us, it's just being accessible to the bush. We saw asbestos and bricks dumped in the bush the other day.
That's like a house worth of bricks.
Coming from a tipper, because they've had access into the bush to tip it and not pay for their tip fees.
And that's where like the gates thing, like, gates are really, they're locking the gates, but a gate isn't necessarily a bad thing if the access is controlled and is managed. But
Sure.
Putting big concrete blocks and bollards in is a different story.
The problem is it's so much easier for someone to manage something by just putting a blanket ban and saying that's closed.
Yeah.
No one can go in there. This is where we need to be clever about it and work out a way we can all work together to get access and keep access to these places, and also take responsibility for these areas.
And I think that's it. Like from what I've heard you guys talk about with the US, it's almost like they're like custodians of those areas, like the Rubicon, right?
100%.
They've got a Rubicon Foundation.
Right? Yeah.
That like they are the custodians of that area. They take pride
and
in
they
it.
patrol.
In a Jeep on 37s.
That was the police
40s. Oh, right.
on 40s. They're not 37s. That's tiny tyres for over there. They're on 40s. But there's people like we met one of the main dudes from the Rubicon Foundation, and they get, when you talk about traffic on a track, if you've ever been to the Glass House on a weekend, even Double Island Point, how many people go down there? The weekend just happened to be a special weekend too that we were driving the Rubicon. There was some Jeep thing down there. 500 Jeeps were driving that track that weekend, and it's not an exaggeration. It wasn't 100, and I'm calling it 500. There were over 500 Jeeps driving that weekend, yet there's no rubbish around.
Yeah, so it's just a mentality thing, right?
Without a doubt. We've changed, what is socially acceptable. A few people can make a lot of mess, which can tarnish a whole population of four-wheel riders.
Ain't that the truth, eh? Like one group of people can trash it. Anyway, we've talked enough about this. I've talked enough about it lately. Let's talk about some positive stuff. You have travelled. We were talking about this last night. Like how many trips you've done.
Yeah.
And you have no idea.
Nah.
It'd be in the hundreds.
Have to. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Is there one trip that stands out above all else? For any reason?
Yeah, there's several, but I don't know, just maybe we're just in a reminiscing mood at the moment, but back in the early days when we did some things that were just never done before. Get this right, so my first trip to Cape York, I'm trying to get this correct, on the way to the tip, the first time I got my photo at the tip of Cape York, I never crossed the Jardine.
How does that work?
Bingo. Glad you asked, Tony.
That was somewhat of a leading question, Shaun, but yes.
Because that trip, I went up the eastern beaches and drove around the Jardine to come back into... So what I'm saying, that trip, the eastern beaches of Cape York, and I explored parts of Cape York that not many people ever...
Can you even go up there now?
Not really. And you can, yes you can, but you need to get... Very tricky.
Like TO permission.
Lots of TO permission. It's all TO land. It's not actually in the jurisdiction of national parks. It's all TO.
Yeah, right.
But it's possible to do that one again. But it was crazy. It was crazy, and I got to do some really cool trips. Like when I was out at the Gulf of Carpentaria, we were in place called Lorella Springs. A lot of people will be familiar with this one, but we forged our own track to a river system on this dude's property that he'd never even seen before with his own eyes.
That was only recent, right?
It was 10 years ago.
Okay.
10 plus years. That was the first time we forged that track.
Yeah.
The 60 series I had was a full-bodied wagon, to give you a bit of context.
Yeah, wow.
And yeah, it got written off. Actually, it got by the insurance company. Got written off after that trip. No joke. And I bought it back for $1,500. That's a little sideline story of the Dirty 30.
And you still have the front half of that cab
In my shed, looking spectacular.
Yeah,
About to start
I
a
saw
build.
a little sneaky photo the other day of it
Yeah.
and went, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That's so cool, man.
A lot of hard work. That was the car that started my career. An old 60 series, that's all I could afford.
Yeah.
And I put like 400,000 Ks on that car.
Yeah. And 400,000 of the hardest Ks.
It ran into the ground.
Yeah, literally. It was basically like, well, it was written off, but then when you retired that vehicle and built the new Dirty 30, like that old 60 was a death trap, right?
Oh, it had to be taken off the road.
Yeah.
Like everything was cracked, the chassis, all the metal fatigue through all the panels. A lot of people don't realise that because when everything looks pretty on a camera, you know, Soot's looking pretty because she is pretty. She's a beast. She's actually looking.
Pretty.
She's actually looking.
What we've just done, it's looking very good,
It is.
mate. It could have
It is.
had the whole side of it caved in.
Easily
on
written off on this trip.
multiple occasions. So, just on that then, where did the love of Toyotas come from? Was it just like you just bought a 60 because it was like a tough, solid axle car and it sort of evolved from there?
Yes and no. My grandfather had a 40 series. So my earliest memories of four-wheel driving, and we'd always been a Toyota family. A lot of country folk really are. And my my granddad had a HJ 47, last of the kind, and he kept it till basically he was too old to drive, essentially. And he would baby that thing. It went everywhere. I remember got memories of going out to Double Island Point back in the day, Rainbow Beach, and sitting on the tray as we drove down the road and then onto the beach and doing that. You know,
Simpler times.
cutting firewood on the way home, and you know, driving my granddad and stopping at every fruit stall between you know King where he lived and you know wherever else we were travelling to. He never took it on a freeway, did every back road possible. So I spent a bit of time in that car when I was with him, and I loved Toyotas.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it was just because of that reason, nothing else.
That's pretty cool. Do you reckon Malcolm Douglas and his troopies and, you know, HJs and all that, do you reckon that had an impact as well in terms of
absolutely.
like Toyota being just like intrinsically linked with four-wheel drive exploration in Australia?
Yeah, I make no mistakes about this. Malcolm Douglas was 100% my idol growing up. Like, I didn't read a stack of books, but he wrote some books and I read them cover to cover multiple times. I was obsessed with the adventures of Malcolm Douglas. Yeah, absolutely.
He was
obsessed.
the OG, right?
Without a shadow of a doubt. Get this right, here's a quick Malcolm Douglas story. I never met Malcolm Douglas, but I spoke to him on the phone.
Oh, true.
Yeah, so imagine this, young 26-year-old editor. We have columns in the magazine, so we've got experts to write columns. And I thought, how cool would it be to get Malcolm Douglas to write a column in
the king, right?
And so I rang him, went straight to voicemail. I got his number. I can't even remember how, but I was a journalist, so I'm pretty handy at getting phone numbers and things. I rang Malcolm Douglas. Malcolm Douglas can't get to the phone right now, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, g'day, it's Shaun here. I just wanted to see if you'd be interested in writing a column for the magazine. Anyway, here's my number, call me back if you can, bye. And anyway, obviously he's not going to ring back because it's Malcolm Douglas. 2 weeks later, my phone rings. I'm like, yeah, g'day. Yeah, g'day, Shaun, it's Malcolm Douglas, mate.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like fangirling in a huge way. I remember I've never paced. I probably did about 4 kilometres pacing back. And he's like, sorry, I didn't get back to you. I was out doing stuff with Bilbies in the, great desert, sandy desert. I declined to write the article because he was so busy and he didn't want to let me down. And I spoke to Malcolm Douglas for no joke, 15, 20 minutes on the phone.
Wow.
And I was in awe.
Amazing.
In absolute awe. Hero of mine, absolutely. As many people, look up to Malcolm Douglas.
He keeps getting brought up on this show, mostly by me, because I was obsessed with him.
Yeah, good.
And the Bush Tucker Man and all that sort of stuff. But like, maybe a year or two ago, someone has started re-uploading old Malcolm Douglas episodes to YouTube, and I've been watching them, and my wife's sitting there like, what is this? Because it's like shot on like a Super 8 or something like prior to VHS, and like, talk about like modifications to vehicles. They were stock Land Cruisers.
Pretty stock,
They might have had a big fuel tank in them.
I remember watching one where he explained how a diff lock works.
Yeah.
And he was driving through some rutted country in the desert, and I'd never even heard of a diff locker at this stage. I'm like a 12-year-old boy, and I'm like, oh, I need one of those. I'll need one of those because I'll need, when I'm building my troopy, I'll need
when
one.
I'm doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it,
I'll
like,
need
how
one
cool
of
is it?
them.
Just like a man and his dog.
Super.
And he was
super
out
cool.
fishing and like just...
And you know what? And there's a guy who runs some of the four-wheel drive shows in this country called Peter Woods.
I know Peter, yeah.
He's an absolute legend. And he has a lot to do with the Douglas family and used to do a lot of producing for Malcolm Douglas.
Yeah,
So you
right.
might not know that. And his son did a lot of filming and for Malcolm
Chris,
Douglas.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's told me a bunch of stories behind the scenes, and he's a real deal. There's no doubt about it.
Maybe that's where the content's coming from, because it's being uploaded by...
No, it's not. It's
No?
it's random. It's someone
It is?
who's plagiarising all the
Recorded
stuff.
them all, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not great for the family. But it's cool that more Australians can see that content because it deserves to be shown.
And man, it stands the test of time. Like it's... I've watched them. I
Yeah.
watched them when I was like a very small child, and like I still enjoy watching them now.
It's just wild. Like he is absolutely the pioneer
Yeah.
of this crazy adventure lifestyle, and he was great at it. There's no doubt about it. He knew the bush, he knew the people, he knew how to get himself out of sticky situations. He's a true bushman,
Yeah.
and it shows in his videos. We get a lot of people now making videos about the Kimberley or something like that who, you know, they got their 5-star caravan and stuff. They wouldn't know the first thing about being stranded in the bush. You got to remember in the 80s and stuff like that, or even 70s. He was making videos, I think, in the 70s, like the old Follow the Sun. We took a pearl lugger from Broome up into the Kimberley. Like, these were done way back in the day in the most dodgy recordings of all time.
Yeah.
And there was no help.
Nah, there was nothing, and it's like it was so raw and so rugged. There was far less people in Australia then. But also, what really strikes me is like his affinity with not only the land but the Indigenous community. Like they welcomed him. Like they knew he was the real deal. They knew he was respectful
Absolutely.
and like
Respectful.
what he was able to convey. Like just information about animals and plants and the seasons, and like it was so much more. Right?
And it was such a good thing for Australia too, because it got people sitting on their couches learning about the real Australia, not the glossy brochures and about how beautiful the Sydney Harbour Bridge is. We all know that stuff, but taking us in Aboriginal communities, taking us into the Great Sandy Desert, you know, watching Aboriginal spear feral cats. Did you see that one? That was crazy.
Absolutely
And they were
insane.
eating them. And like, people think, what? This is Australia. There's a lot of things that happen out in the bush, and it was so good to bring that into people's lounge rooms and show just how big and beautiful this country is. And
yeah, man, he absolutely, I think, set the stage for like that
Without a doubt.
exploration. And it's funny, you know, we've almost gone full circle with the conversation in that the 4-wheel drive was a tool for him. It wasn't like he was going out to go 4-wheel driving.
yeah,
he
let's see how big I can do a wheel lift or something.
Nah,
It wasn't-
he probably wasn't going to drive 6-stage.
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always, there was a destination or a purpose behind it. And and it certainly ignited a fire in my belly when I was a kid. I was like, when I saw that, I was like, how do I do that? How do I do that? And
Well, mate, I reckon you've seen a lot of it.
yeah,
There's-
I have, but there's still so much.
So, your most memorable trip, the 60 up Cape York.
Yep.
What's one that you haven't done that you want to do? Doesn't have to be in Australia. It could be anywhere.
Yeah, no, there's heaps of Australia I still want to do. I would love to see... I went to Exmouth fishing recently, and I got the smallest glimpse of the Western Australia coast. Love to do the Western Australian coast from right down south all the way up to Broome. I've sort of done a bit of Exmouth and Broome north, but I haven't done much of that coast.
Yeah.
Like none of it.
The
And there's-
southwest is beautiful. man.
I'd love to see that. I'd love more touring style stuff.
Yeah.
I guess just, you know, wife, dogs, let's go and check it out and just camp and enjoy it and see it. South Australia, I'd love to do more now in South Australia. Everyone raves about the Eyre Peninsula. I've never been. We were talking about this the other day.
I love South Australia.
Yeah. I'd love to
for,
get down
for
there.
a touring destination.
Yep. Kangaroo
Man.
Island. I'd love to see all that. They're places of Australia I just haven't spent much time. So I'd like to spend more time there. Then that's just, I could speak for about 2 hours of, I sit down, I spend a lot of time driving.
Yeah.
And when I'm driving, if I'm not listening to podcasts and things, I'm thinking about trips that need to be done. And I've got like trips in my head where drive up, I put a boat in, and I go and fish this or do this or stay on the riverbank for a week and try and catch the biggest barra that's ever swum. Like, that's what I think about just on a daily basis.
Yep.
So I've got so many trips lined up here that I'm like keen to do, from Cape York, Kimberley, the Gulf, all the way in the top end.
And like we were talking about, there's an endless amount, right? Of
so
places
many.
and things and ways to go there.
So many.
I asked you this the other night. I think we were standing on the side of a four-wheel drive track at some ungodly hour, and I asked you if you still get excited about the tough wheeling stuff.
Yeah.
And you can tell me what your answer was.
It's not really. I when I'm there and I'm doing it, I'm obsessed with the tough wheeling and I'm loving every moment of it. Like when we did 6 stage the other day, arguably one of the toughest tracks in this country. Yeah, I was loving it as I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Do I sit at home and plan, can I go drive it again? A little bit, but probably I plan more of the touring side of things for when the cameras are turned off. I do, a lot of people go, oh, you never take your 200 series out. I'm like, man, I'm racking the K's up on that thing big time because we're going camping and stuff, but I just don't show it on social media. There's a side of my life.
Funnily enough, you don't film your entire life.
Yeah, that's right.
YouTube.
There's elements that I just do because I freaking love doing it.
Yeah.
And that's one of them. Like, I did a mad big trip out to the Outback recently with Sabrina and the dogs, and went to Lightning Ridge. I've never been to Lightning Ridge. Right? I've driven through, but I never stayed there. So I went to Gruen, Lightning Ridge, and all through the Outback. Stayed on some friends' private properties out that way, and just had a fat time. I forgot to take any photos, and so yes, I didn't upload to Instagram like I probably should have. I know,
who cares,
I know.
Man?
A lot of people judge people's adventures by what they've been able to show on Instagram or whatever. Come and have a beer with me. I'll tell you some cool adventures that I've probably never taken a photo of. I mean,
but isn't that? I think that's better, man. In some respects,
there's
as opposed to people that go somewhere purely to get content to post on the internet, right?
And I do that as well. That's my job. I do that, and I love doing that, and I love showing my adventures. But sometimes when I don't have a film crew with me, I'm hopeless, and I don't take any photos. I'm just living the moment, and I'll go for a full 2 weeks away and come back with 3 irrelevant photos.
Like a portrait of a fat guy on a wall you had in your camera roll last night, just completely
the only photo I took from the
photos,
South Coast. Yeah, it was embarrassing. But
well, I just had a really extreme close-up of Jock's head in my camera roll, so it happens. And we're going in a few circles here, but that's just the way my brain works. I just want to pick up on one thing that we talked about the cars, because we were chatting about it this week. Jock and I were having a discussion as we looked at our cars that were looking a little bit worse for wear.
Yeah.
The amount of punishment that these cars go through, particularly yours, because you do it for a job.
Yeah.
The amount of maintenance that goes into these things, right? I think from talking to people when they see my cars and they go, oh, it looks so good. How do you keep it looking so good? Money.
Yeah.
And maintenance. But what's the sort of lifespan you get out of a vehicle?
Well,
the old Sooty was pretty hammered by the time you finished with him.
Yeah.
How long did you have that vehicle for?
5 years.
5 years.
I believe 5.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a pretty good run, considering what I did.
Yeah.
If you consider most people would keep a vehicle, say they have it for 10 years or 20, whatever, how many big trips they're doing, even if they're doing 1 a year, they're doing 20 big trips in 20 years. I'm doing 20 big trips a year, and over 5 years you're doing 100, there's 100 trips or whatever it might be, something like that. And the trips we're doing is not like, when I'm on a holiday, trust me, I get it. I go around bog holes. I'm not going to drive up that. As if I'm doing gunshot, like I'm in Cape York, when I've got my wife there, I don't want to ruin my
200 series.
I don't want to ruin the car for that. But when I'm on an adventure, hell yeah, I'll do all of it and heaps more stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point, right? Yes, we drive through bog holes, and yes, we drive up ridiculous tracks like 6 stage, but that's not what we're doing on the weekends.
Yeah, and sometimes we do. We do that on the weekends as well, and we go and drive tough tracks. And these vehicles, what I'm getting at, these vehicles have one of the hardest lives of any four-wheel drive out there. And I'm going to preface that by saying they're a compromise, because this vehicle, it just did 6 stage, and it's mostly good. I've ruined a flare on the other side. My roof rack is absolutely on the piss.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, I nearly wrote the car off. But yeah, look, and anyway, there's a few little dramas of that vehicle I need to fix, but I'll be driving it home another 1,000 Ks after we finish here, and I'll drive that thing home, and we'll do the maintenance. We'll start all again. But a lot of guys who drive tracks like that will have a dedicated wheeling rig that will be a tough thing. But this thing can go and do 6 stage, admittedly not as good as a tougher vehicle can, but it'll also go to the Kimberley for a month.
And you can live out of that comfortably.
Easily.
You've got a full draw setup, you've got power, you've got all that
Fridge,
stuff.
yeah, all the stuff I need.
Even the comparison between my ute and this.
Yeah.
Like, yes, my ute was more at home on those tracks.
Yep.
But it was bloody uncomfortable to live out of for 2 weeks. And
Yeah, it's more, your ute's probably more dedicated towards the harder tracks, but then something like this is better dedicated for your touring trips, right?
And I can guarantee you, there is no way I'll ever point that up 6 stage.
It would never look the same as that
I
if you did.
wouldn't do it, right? And,
Yeah.
and you're absolutely right, it's the compromise. And I think for the majority of people who don't have the luxury of multiple specialised 4-wheel drives, it's just that understanding of like, hey, yeah, you can do this stuff, but you've got to do preventative maintenance, and you're probably going to have a bill when you get home, right?
Yeah, exactly. And most people aren't as tapped as I am and try and drive all the hard things. I'm an optimistic forward driver. I see a lot, I'm like, I reckon I could, if I put a wheel there and give it a bit of gas and hit second halfway up the hill, I reckon I'll make that. So yeah, I do push it pretty hard, but
but it's amazing, man. Like,
I enjoy it.
And I've said it to you before, like seeing the first Sooty was what motivated me to buy an 80 series.
Yeah,
I went,
sick.
hey, if he can do that, I'm never going to do that.
Yeah, well, and it's testimony of the vehicles. Yes, there's a lot of maintenance and stuff like that, but it's not as much as people might think. Like, there's a mob up in Queensland, Pinnacle, that look after these, in particular this one here, and have done so much work on it. And that's why I'm not doing wheel bearings on trips and stuff like that. I'm not having these weird, I guess, things that could have been prevented, like maintenance-wise, because it's all handled by those guys. They go over it with a fine-tooth comb, and just so I'm not wasting time doing something that could have been done in the shed. I broke a tail shaft. You're going to see lots of repairs done to the car, but it's usually because I've broken something.
Yeah, but you broke a tail shaft because we were not onto it as spotters and didn't say, hey, maybe stop smashing your tail shaft into that rock. But like, that's unavoidable. But like, your wheel bearing collapsing, that's avoidable.
You've got to fix that. And that's why the guys just, that's one less thing I need to worry about. Otherwise it'd be a full-time job. I've got a few four-wheel drives, and keeping them all trip ready would be nearly a full-time exercise these days. And I still do stuff myself, but it's minimal compared to what, say Pinnacle do on maintenance-wise.
Car, so I wouldn't say that's minimal.
Oh yeah, well I built the car. That was cool. That was cool. Like I'm not a mechanic. I don't pretend to be. I'm mechanical from necessity, and when I took on this job, it was actually one of my mates, Jacko, who convinced me to do it. He's like, of course you can do it. And I'm like, dude, I'm doing a petrol to diesel conversion and an auto to manual conversion by myself in the shed. He's like, yeah, you'll do it. You'll figure it out. I'm like, no, I can't do that. I can do maintenance-y stuff, but I'm not doing conversions.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you'll figure it out. And I did.
Yep.
I did with a lot of help, mind you. I had a lot of help.
From people like Jacko, who are basically an encyclopedia of Toyota.
Correct. Yeah, he helped a heck of a lot. And, Joel down the road and a few guys, heaps of guys in the industry and stuff like that. But when it came to, like, putting the manual gearbox, I cut the transmission tunnel. I welded in the transmission tunnel from original sort of to this one and fitted the box and all this sort of stuff. And I was just figuring it out. And I was actually probably more proud of building that car than most of my mechanical exploits.
Oh, man. And like, I'm not mechanically minded. I'm not mechanical. I don't claim to be. And to be honest, I don't really have an interest in it.
Yeah.
Like, I like cars. I like what they can do. I'm not that interested in building them, right?
Yeah,
and
so I love building them.
Yeah, see, and that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
And like, I look at people like Jock and Jesse, and they love tinkering in the
they're
shed.
next level.
And they're next level.
Like Jesse would be every weekend, every night working on a car.
Just loves it, right?
100%. And while I do, and I enjoy it when I'm doing it, I'm not doing as much as he is. He's obsessed. That's why we love him so much.
See, I do it out of necessity.
Yeah.
Like before this trip, I had to fix some stuff on the car, so I did it. But I wasn't like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. I was like, I'm going to enjoy this when it's like on two wheels halfway up a hill,
I like the satisfaction of doing a job yourself. I like pushing myself out of my comfort zone and doing something new on the car. One thing building that car is there's not a nut or bolt in that car I don't know about.
That's what I was getting to, is like the advantage that you have is when something goes wrong, you know where to look because you've put it there. Whereas when something goes wrong on my car, I go, oh shit, and I'm going to start digging and figure out where the sparkies run a wire. And yes, we can figure it out, but it takes that extra bit of time. And I think for me, I need to push myself to learn a little bit more, just so that I'm more self-reliant when I'm out with the wife.
It's handy. I mean, like we've always been able to get cars out of the bush, and that's one of the things with us. Like, even like, look at Graham, you know, he's not the most mechanically minded bloke, but yet him and I somehow will be in the middle of the desert or Cape York, and a car will, you know, do a steering rack, or it'll be completely, you'd be ringing a tow truck, put it that way. We somehow managed to get that car out of the bush not nearly every single time.
Yeah.
So we've never left a vehicle. The first time I left a vehicle in the bush was a couple of days ago. I left Sooty in there with a broken tail shaft. It's only a tail shaft. Went in town to get a new one, came back and fitted. That's the whole story and how that worked. But
yeah, we'll leave that one for the show.
that's pretty full on. We made a tail shaft that doesn't really fit, and
we had cars winched into trees. There was all sorts of things.
It was pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, but that's.
But you didn't leave it in the bush.
It was just go like, I don't know how we're going to get this out. I need help. We somehow figure out a way. And I like that creative side of like the mechanical sort of stuff, when you're like, that's bush mechanics 101, when you're just like, what have I got? I've got some fencing wire, I've got some cable ties, I've got this, I've got that, and a good attitude. Let's see how we get this out of the bush.
Man, I've seen it firsthand, and like the one that stood out to me was the Steady 200 series on Fraser Island.
Oh yeah.
Where it like snapped the cast knuckle, and Jesse's there putting hose clamps on it.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of hose clamps.
That's not going to work. Like, I'm not mechanically minded, but I'll tell you that's not going to work.
It worked.
It worked. And also, it's not a coincidence that Jesse had heaps of hose clamps there.
They were mine.
Oh, were they yours?
They were mine. They came out of my little, I got a little sausage roll. It's in there, actually. It's in the back of here. But it's got hose clamps, it's got nuts, bolts, all those. You know when you do a mechanical job and you get parts left over?
You just keep them.
Yeah, some people say you shouldn't have parts left over. Put them in a little sack or a toolbox or something, bring it with you.
Yeah.
And that's my little fix. Like, it's got some little bag of tricks. Like, the amount of times a bolt has saved the day.
Yeah.
And then I've upped the ante, and I've got things like 406 Loctite, like the super glue stuff. Yeah. I've got on this trip, I grabbed some. I had JB Weld.
Yeah.
That came out on this trip. Saved a whole another day. The car would have been left in the bush.
Yeah, 100% it would have.
We fixed it. We drove it out, and it was still driving for the next few days. And yeah, the thing will go forever now. But,
so good. Man.
Yeah, but it's just those little tricks, which are 20 years of being in the bush will do that. And you just know what to take to get your little bag of tricks. You've always got it. And even if you don't really know how to use it, someone will have an idea, and you're like, oh yeah, who's got that? And I'm like, haha, I do.
Yeah. And it's funny, like saying, oh, who's got this? Yeah, I've got that. Oh, I've got this. And everyone starts pooling their resources. It is very cool, and I think that's something that it just adds to the adventure, right?
Yeah.
They're the stories that you tell.
For sure.
Not, remember when you drove that rock step? Who cares?
Yeah, when we had the perfect trip.
Wired a car back together with fencing wire and drove it 1,000 Ks. That's the cool stuff.
There's so many of those cool stories. That's what we live for. That's what's exciting about it. It's like you come unstuck in a big way, or someone does in the convoy, and you all work together on how you're going to fix it and overcome it and still get it out of that track and drive it, and makes cool memories. It's cool stuff. I love it,
mate. We could I could choke to death. We could talk for hours. We have talked for many hours, but to go full circle,
yep,
would you ever write a book? I mean, you are a journalist.
You know what? Yes, I would. I would love to write a cookbook.
Yes.
Okay, that's not, if that counts as a book, I don't think.
Book.
Yeah, okay, it's technically a book. It's got a cover and pages, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to write a cookbook. I'm actually passionate about my cooking. A lot of people probably see the funny side of what I do, and I'm not a serious bloke. I take the piss out of a lot of things. But I do actually enjoy cooking, and I'd love to do that, because cooking in the bush has a whole other element opposed to cooking at home, right?
100%.
You're cooking on a fire or gas or whatever you're cooking at the back of a car. I love that about camping. I love getting with an idea of a recipe and cooking that at camp. Would I do one of my adventures? Absolutely. The biggest drama I have is trying to remember them all, because there's...
all starts to blur into one.
It really does. Maybe it's a sign of how old I'm getting now these days, or just how many trips I've done. But they start to blend in a little bit. I'd need to rely on some people around me to come up with some of the cool moments. And I think if I was doing a book, it'd be more of a collaboration with a lot of people that have, because these adventures is not me, it's all the people I've been lucky enough to hang out with, and we've 100%. Just done it together. So if I was going to write a book, it would be some sort of thing like that, where we just get stories from the scrub of real cool forward drive trips.
Well, if you can ever make it happen, mate, I think it'd be a phenomenal piece of work. It'd be a lot of work, but it's something that I'm sure people would love to.
It'd be fun.
See.
Yeah.
Well, man, I'm going to let you get back in your car and keep driving.
Keep driving. I think about 800 k's to go or something. 700. It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
No,
we'll get it home.
It's been great, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I am going to get you back one of these days for a different topic.
Yep.
Because we've got a lot of things to talk about in the marine world.
That'll be good. Yeah, we haven't even touched on the fishing stuff, but yeah, that's exciting. That's been a big part of my life for many, many years too.
Yeah, definitely.
Very passionate about it.
We'll have to sort that out, and who knows? Maybe we'll try and tee that up on Mojo one day.
Wow, that sounds like a date, mate.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot, bro.
Thanks, Tones.
Really appreciate
Cheers,
it,
brother.
man. And we will see all of you next time on the Outer Side.